Chicago, January 11:47 p.m. The snow had been falling since noon, and by midnight it had buried the city. From the 52nd floor of Roth Tower, the windows offered a view of nothing but white, a dense, driving curtain of flakes that swallowed the streetlights whole and turned the Chicago skyline into a smear of amber ghosts. The wind rattled the glass in its frames. Somewhere below, a car alarm wailed briefly and then fell silent, defeated by the storm. Inside, the conference room blazed with fluorescent certainty. 8 people sat around a table made of glass and chrome, the kind of furniture chosen not for comfort, but for the message it sent. Everything here is transparent. Everything here is sharp. Everything here will cut you if you lean too hard. Evelyn Roth sat at the head of the table, 51 years old, wearing a charcoal blazer she had not taken off since the Tokyo call at 6 that morning. Her hair was silver, not the kind that comes from age, but the kind that comes from decision cut short and perfectly maintained. She had the posture of someone who had spent decades in rooms exactly like this one, fighting for control of exactly these kinds of numbers, and winning. In front of her lay the contract, 127 pages. Dense, single-spaced, structured in the Baroque legalese of German corporate law. The header read, Krauss, Biotech GmbH Strategic Partnership Framework Roth Capital Group. Below that, a thicket of subclauses, references, and cross-references that even the sharpest minds in the room had been staring at for the better part of 10 hours without cracking. "We are out of options," said Harold Whitman, Roth Capital's CFO, from his seat 2 chairs down. Harold was 60, meticulous, and tonight he looked the way he always looked when he was genuinely frightened. He looked very calm. Berlitz sent their best. She lasted 4 hours before she called it a specialized legal instrument and asked us to find a different specialist. The firm in New York closed at 9. Every certified translator with German corporate experience within 100 miles of this building is either unreachable or stuck in the storm. "The deadline is 9 a.m., said Laura Stein, the company's general counsel, without looking up from her yellow notepad. She had been writing since 8 o'clock. Her handwriting was small and very neat. If we do not have a clear understanding of the operative clauses before the morning call with Munich, we are signing blind. I won't recommend that." "Nobody's asking you to recommend it," said Derek Vaughn, the COO. Derek was 43 and had a habit of saying things that sounded like decisions, but weren't. He leaned back in his chair. "We're asking you to find a way around it." Laura said nothing. She kept writing. The room had the quality of a held breath. Somewhere in the ventilation system, a fan hummed. The snow pressed against the glass. It was into this silence that Adrian Keller pushed his cart. He came in through the service entrance at the far end of the room, the one that nobody used because nobody thought about it. His cart held a yellow plastic bucket, a mop, a spray bottle, and a folded collection of gray cleaning rags. He wore the uniform of Roth Tower's contracted facilities staff, dark gray trousers, a gray collared shirt with the building's logo above the left breast pocket. His work badge, clipped to his collar, read A, Keller Night Services. He was 38 years old, broad-shouldered, with a few days of dark stubble on a face that was still quiet even at nearly midnight. His eyes moved across the room once, professionally, cataloging. Water rings on the credenza. A coffee cup tipped on its side near the window. The general disorder of 8 people trying to solve an urgent problem in a room not designed for urgent problems. He did not make eye contact with anyone. He moved to the credenza and began. The executives, for their part, did not look at him. This was not cruelty. It was simply the operating logic of the environment. The man with the cleaning cart was furniture, useful furniture. But furniture nonetheless. Evelyn Roth stood up. She walked to the window, stared at the white nothing outside, and turned back to the room. In her hand, she held the contract as though it weighed significantly more than 127 pages. "We have been at this for 10 hours, she said. Her voice was flat, precise, the kind of voice that had learned not to waste energy on inflection. "We have called every resource this company possesses, and several it doesn't. We cannot find a translator." A pause. "So, who in this room has another idea?" Silence. Evelyn's gaze traveled around the table and landed, almost as an afterthought, almost as a joke she was making to herself, on the man at the credenza. "Maybe we let the janitor have a look," she said. The words came out dry, light, carrying exactly the weight of mockery and not a gram more. "Translate this. My salary's yours." Laughter. Brief, sharp, the involuntary kind. Harold did not laugh, but he smiled. Derek laughed and then stopped himself. Two of the junior associates at the end of the table laughed and then looked at each other, checking whether that had been appropriate. Adrian Keller set down the spray bottle. He set it down carefully, with the deliberate motion of someone who is choosing to set something down rather than someone who simply stops what he is doing. He turned. He looked at the contract in Evelyn Roth's hand, then at the table, then at Evelyn Roth. "I accept," he said. The laughter stopped. The room went very quiet. Outside, the blizzard pressed on, indifferent. 3 years of watching. Adrian Keller had worked the night shift at Roth Tower for 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. He knew the building the way you only know a place you have moved through in silence while it is occupied by people who do not see you. He knew which of the executive floors still had lights at 2 in the morning. He knew that Harold Whitman left his desk lamp on every night without fail, and that it was never because he was working late, it was because Harold Whitman was afraid of dark rooms, though he would never have said so. He knew that the junior analysts on 47 left coffee cups in positions that described their anxiety levels with remarkable accuracy. Upright and handled meant they were fine, tilted on the rim meant they were stressed, tipped completely on their sides meant there had been news from management. He knew the building's rhythms, the way a doctor knows a patient, not from reading reports, but from daily attendance. Tonight, as he moved his cart down the service corridor toward 52, his mind was not in the building at all. It was in the apartment on West Addison Street, on the 3rd floor, second door on the left, where his son Noah was asleep under 2 blankets with a nebulizer on the nightstand and a copy of a picture book about deep-sea fish on the pillow beside him. Noah was 7 years old and had persistent, moderate asthma, which was the medical community's way of saying that the condition was manageable and also that the management never quite stopped. Twice in the past year, the management had failed briefly and dramatically, and twice Adrian had spent the night in a hospital waiting room, holding his son's things in a plastic bag and running calculations in his head. The most recent calculation had produced a number: $3,400. That was the outstanding balance on Noah's last hospitalization, the portion that the inadequate insurance Adrian carried through the facility's contracting company did not cover. He had 3 months to pay it before it went to collections. Rent was 11 days overdue. He pushed his cart and thought about these numbers, as he did every night, turning them the way you turn a problem that has no current solution, keeping them warm, keeping them present, not letting himself stop looking. He thought about his wife, Christine, who had died of ovarian cancer 22 months ago, in the spring, on a Tuesday, in a hospital room with a window that looked out on a parking structure. She had made him promise, in the way that people make promises in those rooms, that he would not disappear, not from Noah, not from his own life, that he would keep his hands in the real world. He was keeping his hands in the real world. His hands were on a mop handle. His hands would, in a moment, be on a contract in a language he had spent 6 years of his life learning to think in. He thought about graduate school. He thought about it the way you think about a room you lived in for years that has since been repainted and given to someone else, not with grief exactly, but with a very specific recognition. The room had been his. The work had been his. He had spent 6 years inside the architecture of German legal language, learning its load-bearing walls, the places where it was weaker than it looked and the places where it was stronger than it had any right to be. His advisor had called his thesis a significant contribution to the field, which was the academic version of high praise, and had said it in the particular way that meant he had expected it. He had expected more, too. He had expected to finish, but you made decisions with the life you had, not the life you had expected. Christine had been the one to say that, not about herself, not about the diagnosis, but about something smaller. Some ordinary disappointment he could no longer remember. She had said it without bitterness, which was the thing about Christine. She never seemed to carry bitterness, even when bitterness would have been entirely warranted. He thought sometimes that this was not a natural disposition but a practice, a thing she had decided to do so consistently that it had become character. He was trying to do the same thing. He was not sure he was succeeding, but he got up every morning. He took Noah to school. He read to him at night. He kept the apartment clean and the bills as current as he could and the refrigerator stocked with the foods Noah would actually eat, which was a narrower category than anyone would prefer. He kept going. He pushed his cart down the service corridor and thought about the $3,400 balance and the overdue rent and the mathematics of the next 6 months, turning the numbers the way you turn something heavy in your hands, looking for the angle where it becomes manageable. He had been looking for that angle for 22 months. He had not found it yet. He had not stopped looking. He pushed through the service door into the conference room and did what he always did. He assessed, he catalogued, he began. He did not need them to see him. He had long since stopped needing that. Ombre, Aliki, PM. Nobody moved. Evelyn Roth looked at the man who had just accepted her offer, the offer she had made as a joke, the offer that was not supposed to be accepted, and felt something she was not accustomed to feeling in this room, uncertainty about what happened next. "You speak German," she said. It was not quite a question. "I read German," Adrian said. "Specifically, I read legal German. There's a difference. Spoken German is approximately what you expect. Legal German is its own instrument." Derek Vaughan made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "This is insane. Give him a section," Laura Stein said. Everyone looked at her. Laura's expression did not change. She had been a lawyer for 19 years, and she had the practitioner's instinct for relevant data, regardless of its source. "Give him a section," she said again. 10 minutes. If he can't produce, we haven't lost anything except 10 minutes. Evelyn considered this for exactly 2 seconds. Then she slid the contract across the table to the open chair at the near end, the one where no executive was sitting. The implication was clear enough. Adrian came forward. He set his spray bottle on the floor by the door, quietly. He sat down. He did not open the contract immediately. He looked at the table of contents for 11 seconds. 11 seconds that felt considerably longer to the people watching, and then turned to page 44. "Section 7, he said. "I'd recommend starting there, but I'll read you the passage you choose." "Page 61, Derek said. The tone said, "Prove it." Adrian turned to page 61. He read the German silently for a moment. Then he began to speak. "The relevant passage," he said, "concerns the allocation of existing liabilities during the term of the partnership. In German corporate law, this draws from the Handelsgesetzbuch, the Commercial Code, specifically sections 128 and 130, which establish joint liability for partnership obligations. The clause, as written in this contract, does not merely reference those sections. It extends them." He paused. "It would help to know what your attorneys told you this clause meant when they summarized it." Harold Whitman looked at Laura. Laura looked at her notepad. "The summary we received," Laura said slowly, "described this section as a standard liability sharing agreement, proportional to capital contribution." Adrian looked at page 61. "That is not what it says," he said. The room changed. It was not a dramatic change. No one stood up. No one gasped, but something shifted in the quality of attention. The air got heavier. "What does it say?" Evelyn asked. His voice did not change register. It was the same calm, measured voice he had used to say, "I accept." It was the voice, Evelyn would think later, of someone who has been certain about something for a long time and is simply now being given the opportunity to demonstrate that certainty. He began to translate. 12:09 a.m. He did not translate the way a translator translates. That was the first thing Laura Stein noticed, and she was a person trained to notice the first thing. A translator moves between languages the way a messenger moves between buildings. They carry the content intact. They deliver it. They step back. What Adrian Keller was doing was different. He was translating and simultaneously annotating, providing the German text, then the English rendering, then the legal context in which the English rendering had to be understood. He was treating the document not as a text to be converted, but as a system to be mapped. Laura picked up her pen. She began writing. Harold Whitman had stopped checking his phone. He sat forward, his hands flat on the table, his gaze on Adrian with the fixed attention of a man who has just realized the presentation he thought he had seen before is actually something he has never seen. Derek Vaughn's arms were no longer crossed. He had uncrossed them at some point in the past 7 minutes without noticing. Adrian moved through the section on page 61. He explained that the clause used the phrase wirtschaftliche Einheit, economic unit, which in German commercial law had a specific technical meaning that was broader than the English phrase suggested. He explained that this breadth was not incidental but structural, that the clause had been written using exactly this language rather than more specific language for a reason. "The reason," he said, "is that wirtschaftliche Einheit creates a legal umbrella. Under this umbrella, the liabilities of the partnership do not remain proportional to contribution. They become joint and several, which means each party is liable for the whole," Laura said. "Each party is liable for the whole," Adrian confirmed. Silence. "But our summary," Harold began. "Your summary may have been prepared by someone working from a standard legal German reference without specific familiarity with modern interpretive practice in the Bundesgerichtshof," Adrian said. "The Federal Court of Justice has expanded the application of wirtschaftliche Einheit significantly in the past decade. The expansion is well documented, but not widely known outside German commercial litigation circles." Evelyn Roth had not moved in 4 minutes. She sat with both hands on the table, watching Adrian Keller with an expression that no one at the table had seen on her face before because no one had ever given her a reason to wear it. She was paying attention, not the managed, strategic attention she deployed in negotiations, real attention, the kind that forgets to perform itself. "Keep going," she said. He kept going. For the next 30 minutes, Conference Room 52 ceased to be a conference room. It became something closer to a classroom, or perhaps a surgical theater, a place where one person was demonstrating something precise and consequential, while others watched and slowly understood the shape of what they were looking at. Adrian moved through the document with the same unhurried certainty. He translated and annotated, paused to answer questions, flagged passages he wanted to return to, and built, section by section, a picture of a contract that was substantially different from the one the executives believed they were considering signing. At one point, one of the junior associates, a young woman named Carrie, 24 years old, 3 months into the job and still taking the temperature of every room she entered before she spoke, asked a question about the specific use of the subjunctive mood in one of the clauses. It was a good question, the kind of question that indicated she had been following closely enough to notice something that required noticing. Adrian answered it fully, without the smallest hesitation. Carrie wrote down the answer. Then she looked at him with an expression she couldn't quite suppress, a kind of confused reassessment, as though she were trying to reconcile 2 images that occupied the same space and couldn't. Adrian noticed and said nothing. He turned the page. There was a quality to the room now that was different from the crisis room quality it had carried for the previous 10 hours. The crisis had not resolved, if anything. The stakes had gotten higher as Adrian worked through the document. But the anxiety had changed character. Before he sat down, the anxiety in the room had been formless. The anxiety of people who cannot locate the thing they are supposed to be afraid of. Now they could see it. The fear had acquired a shape, and while a shaped fear was still fear, it was a fear you could begin to think about. This, Adrian understood, was the actual value of his work, not the translation itself, but the map it produced. The map that told you where the walls were, where the floor was solid and where it was not, where the exits were located. Once you had the map, you could make a decision. Without it, you were just moving through darkness, hoping you didn't fall. 12:31 a.m. The room goes still. He stopped on page 73. The pause was different from his other pauses, longer, more deliberate. He read the passage once. Then again. He set the contract down and looked at the ceiling for a moment, which was the only time all evening anyone had seen him look at anything other than the document or the person he was speaking to. Section 11, he said. Paragraph 4. Subsection C. He read the German aloud first. Slow, precise, treating each compound noun with particular care. Then, in the event that any affiliated entity of either party incurs obligations during the term of this agreement that arise from or are connected to commercial activities within the defined economic unit, such obligations shall be construed as obligations of the partnership, regardless of whether the party was informed of or consented to the specific obligation at the time of its incurrence. He set the contract down. Say that again, Harold said. If Kraus Biotech has a subsidiary of a subsidiary, or a company connected to them by ownership or contract, and that company incurs a debt or a liability during the term of your partnership, that liability belongs to both of you, even if you didn't know about it, even if you didn't agree to it, even if the connection to Kraus is indirect enough that you would not ordinarily consider it your concern. The room was very quiet. What kind of liabilities are we talking about? Evelyn asked. Kraus Biotech GmbH has 19 documented subsidiaries across 6 countries, Adrian said. Of those, at least 4 are operating in markets with significant pending litigation. 1 is currently under investigation by the European Medicines Agency for clinical trial irregularities. The details are in their public filings if you want them confirmed. But the clause as written would encompass any judgment or settlement arising from those proceedings. Harold Whitman's color changed. It changed the way the color changes in the face of someone who is doing arithmetic in real time and does not like the answer the arithmetic is producing. How much? He said. The pending clinical trial matter alone, Laura said, pulling up a document on her laptop with hands that moved very quickly, has an estimated exposure of... She stopped. She looked at the screen. The plaintiff's filings estimate aggregate damages at 800 million euros. No one spoke. Outside, the blizzard had intensified. The wind was audible now, a low sustained pressure against the glass that sounded, if you let yourself think about it, like something trying to get in. 800 million, Derek said. That is the plaintiff's estimate, Adrian said. Courts rarely award the full plaintiff estimate, but the clause does not require an adverse judgment. It requires only that the liability exist during the term of the partnership. Settlement, verdict, or ongoing legal exposure, all of it would qualify under the language as written. Evelyn Roth stood up. She walked to the window. She looked at the white nothing outside. It's not a partnership agreement, she said, to the window. No, Adrian said. It's a liability transfer mechanism. That's one way to read it. She turned. What's another way? There isn't one, he said. I was being polite. 1, 2, a.m. The architecture of the trap. He found the second problem 40 minutes later, on page 91. By then, the room had reorganized itself. The junior associates were no longer at the far end of the table. They had moved closer, not consciously but incrementally, pulled in by the gravity of what was happening. Laura had filled 7 pages of her notepad. Harold had stopped looking calm. Section 14. Paragraph 2 concerned intellectual property, the new diagnostics platform that was, nominally, the reason for the partnership in the first place. Roth Capital had spent 18 months and $43 million on the preliminary development work. The platform was the asset. Acquiring co-ownership of the IP was the point of the deal. The phrase used in the original German, Adrian said, is Nutzungsrecht. It does not mean ownership. It means right of use. The distinction in German law is not subtle. It is categorical. A Nutzungsrecht grants you the ability to use the intellectual property. It does not grant you title. It does not grant you the right to sublicense. It does not grant you the right to modify. And it terminates by the default provisions of German IP law upon the dissolution of the partnership. Laura put her pen down for the first time all evening. The translation we received, she said, used the word ownership. I know, Adrian said. That is the translation you would get from a standard legal dictionary. It is not the translation you would get from someone familiar with German IP jurisprudence. So the $43 million we put in, Harold said, the platform we built, would revert entirely to Kraus Biotech upon dissolution. Yes, Harold sat back. He looked at the ceiling. He did not look at anyone for 30 seconds. The third problem was in Section 19, and it was, in its way, the most elegant of the 3, arbitration. Every significant contract has an arbitration clause, a provision specifying where and how disputes will be resolved if the partnership breaks down. The clause in this contract specified the Deutsches Institut für Schiedsgerichtsbarkeit, the German Arbitration Institute in Munich, under German law, with proceedings conducted in German. This means, Adrian said, that any dispute you initiate would be conducted in Munich, in German, by arbitrators selected under German institutional rules, applying German commercial law. Your American legal team would need German co-counsel who are accredited before that institution. The procedural rules are substantially different from AAA or JAMS arbitration. The timelines are longer, the discovery process is more limited, and the awards, while nominally enforceable in the U.S. under the New York Convention, would face significant practical obstacles in collection. He closed the contract. In summary, he said, this document proposes the following arrangement. Roth Capital Group accepts joint and several liability for an estimated $800 million in third-party exposure it cannot audit. Roth Capital Group contributes its intellectual property to the partnership and receives in return a use license that terminates when the partnership does. And any attempt to remedy these arrangements through legal action will be conducted in a foreign jurisdiction, in a foreign language, under foreign procedural rules. He set his hands flat on the table. That is what you were about to sign, he said. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than any that had preceded it. It was the silence of people who have just seen a very large number in a context where they cannot ignore it. Harold Whitman stared at the contract as though it had changed its appearance, which in a sense it had. The document was the same 127 pages it had always been. The words were the same, only the understanding of them had changed, and the understanding had changed everything. He thought about the board meeting they would have had in 6 weeks. He thought about the press release announcing the partnership, which his communications team had drafted and sent to him for review that morning. He thought about the moment, somewhere in the next year, when the Kraus subsidiary litigation resolved unfavorably, and someone, a lawyer, a regulator, a reporter had gone through the partnership agreement and found Section 11, Paragraph 4, Subsection C. He thought about what that moment would have looked like. We would have been bankrupt in 18 months, Harold said. Nobody argued with him. 1:34 a.m. Who are you? Evelyn Roth sat down. She did this slowly, with the deliberate quality of someone who does not trust their own legs at this particular moment. The room had been quiet for 3 minutes. It was a different kind of quiet than before, not the quiet of people waiting for something to happen, but the quiet of people processing something that has already happened and is larger than they initially understood. "Who are you?" Evelyn asked. Adrian looked at her. He did not look away. "My name is on my badge," he said. "That's not what I mean." A pause. A long one. "I have a Master of Arts in Germanic Linguistics from the University of Chicago," he said. "My thesis was on the evolution of commercial terminology in German corporate law between 1945 and 1990, specifically the divergence between East and West German legal language during partition and the reunification problems that followed. I was admitted to the doctoral program in 2014. "Was," Laura said. "Was," he confirmed. "My wife became ill in 2015. Ovarian cancer, stage 3, diagnosed in March. I left the program in May." He said this without inflection, the way you say things that have had a long time to stop being surprising. "She died in 2022. Before she died, I had a son to care for. After she died, I still had a son to care for. Noah is 7. He has asthma. The insurance I carry through the facilities contract does not cover the full cost of his treatment." No one in the room moved. "I work nights because I can take him to school in the morning. I pick him up in the afternoon. My neighbor, Mrs. Gallagher, watches him from 8 until I get home at 2. That is the arrangement." He looked around the table. "It is not an ideal arrangement. But it is the arrangement." Derek Vaughn looked at the table. He had been the one to laugh the longest at Evelyn's joke. He looked at the table for a long time. "Why didn't you say something?" Harold asked. "When you came in?" Before the comment, "You could have just—" Adrian looked at him. "Could I?" he said. Harold started to answer. Then he stopped. "I have pushed my cart through this floor," Adrian said, 147 times in the past year. 42 of those times, there were people in the conference room when I arrived. Not once in 42 occasions did anyone in this room speak to me. Not a greeting, not a request, not a question. He was not angry. He was precise. "I am not blaming you. That is not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that you asked why I didn't say something, and the answer is, in my experience of this environment, I am not someone who is expected to have something to say." Evelyn Roth said nothing for a long time. "Would you have listened?" Adrian asked. Nobody answered him. The blizzard pressed against the windows. The fan in the ventilation system hummed. 1:47 a.m. The machines confirm. Laura Stein ran the verification herself. She used 3 tools: a professional-grade legal translation service that the firm paid $1,200 a month to access, an enterprise AI translation system that Roth Capital's IT department had integrated into their document management platform, and a call at nearly 2 in the morning to a colleague in Frankfurt who had been her contact at a German law firm for 11 years and who answered on the 3rd ring, asked no questions about the hour, and read the relevant passages when Laura read them to him. It took 44 minutes. During those 44 minutes, Adrian Keller sat at the far end of the table and drank the coffee that one of the junior associates had brought him without being asked. He drank it the way he did everything, without hurry, without ostentation. Harold Whitman sat across from him and did not speak, but also did not look away. Derek Vaughn had stepped out to make a call and had not returned. The junior associates sat very still. Adrian did not fill the silence. He had spent 3 years working in rooms where silence was what was expected of him, and he had learned to inhabit it without performing discomfort. He sat with his coffee and occasionally glanced at the contract where it lay on the table, not reading it now, but having read it the way a musician sits near an instrument they have just played, in the particular relationship of completion. Harold Whitman looked at him twice during those 44 minutes, and both times started to say something and then didn't. The second time, what he had been about to say was, "I'm sorry." He hadn't said it because it seemed insufficient, and he wasn't sure in the honest way. You are not sure about things at 2 in the morning when you have been stripped of your operating assumptions, whether the insufficiency was the apology's problem or his own. At 1:47 a.m., Laura looked up from her laptop. "He's correct," she said. On every point. The wirtschaftliche Einheit analysis, the Nutzungsrecht versus ownership distinction, the arbitration forum implications, all of it. My Frankfurt contact called the liability clause, one of the more aggressive examples of exposure transfer he has seen in a standard partnership structure. She paused. Those are his words. Evelyn Roth had been standing at the window for most of those 44 minutes. "All right," she said. She turned. "Pull the deal, Evelyn," Harold said carefully. "The deposit. Pull it. $50 million. Harold." Her voice did not rise. We were 3 signatures away from accepting legal liability for a potential $800 million in third-party debt that we cannot audit, forfeiting our IP rights to a platform that cost $43 million to develop, and locking ourselves into a dispute resolution mechanism designed in Munich, conducted in German. Before arbitrators, we had no role in selecting. She looked at him. $50 million is the cost of not signing that document. I can live with that cost. I cannot live with the other one. Harold was quiet. "Pull the deal," Evelyn said. "Document the reasons. Have legal prepare a withdrawal notice by 6 a.m. We will need to communicate with the board before the morning call." Laura was already writing. 2:15 a.m. What respect looks like. The others had left. Derek by the service elevator, 20 minutes ago, Harold shortly after, the junior associates dispatched to draft preliminary documents and call whatever contacts could be reached at this hour. The room had returned to the state it was in before the crisis. A glass table, chrome chairs, the faint smell of cold coffee. Adrian was collecting his things. The spray bottle, the rags, the cart was by the door. Evelyn Roth stood between him and the door. "I owe you an apology," she said. He looked at her. "Not for asking you to translate," she said. "For the way I asked. The comment was it was cheap. It was the kind of cheap I would not have accepted from someone else in this room, and I should not have produced it myself." He said nothing. He let her finish. "I want to offer you a position," Evelyn said. "Director of International Contracts. The role is currently open. The man who held it left in October, and we have been searching without success. The compensation is $190,000 per year, with a standard benefits package that includes comprehensive health coverage." She paused on the last 3 words, letting them land. $190,000. Comprehensive health coverage. He heard it. She could see that he heard it, the thing it would mean for Noah. For the hospital balance, for the rent 11 days overdue, for the arrangement with Mrs. Gallagher that was not ideal but was the arrangement. "I have conditions," he said. "Tell me, the position is on my merits, not on tonight." Tonight demonstrated competence, but it also demonstrated that your organization missed something significant in a document you had reviewed for 10 hours. "I would want to understand the process that produced that failure before I agreed to be part of the process." Evelyn blinked. It was a very small gesture. Fair. "I would want to meet with Laura Stein before accepting." She asked the right question tonight. "I want to understand what the right question looks like from inside this organization before I decide whether I can work inside it." Also fair. And I would want it stated clearly to whoever needs to hear it that the position was offered because the work warranted it, not because of an unusual circumstance, not as a story anyone tells. Evelyn Roth looked at him for a long moment. "I don't need your salary," he said. "I need your respect. If the salary comes with the respect, I'll consider both." She put her hand out. He shook it. He picked up his cart and walked it to the service corridor. Before he pushed through the door, he paused. He picked up the coffee cup that had been tipped on its side near the window, the one he had noticed when he first came in, and set it upright on the tray beside the credenza. Then he left. Evelyn stood in the empty room and looked at the windows. The city below was emerging in fragments, a traffic light, a line of parked cars, the yellow dome of a street lamp. She stood there for a while before she turned off the lights. July morning light. The office on the 48th floor had a window that faced east. Adrian had arranged his desk so that he sat facing the window during the morning hours, with his back to it in the afternoon when the light became flat and utilitarian. He had a framed photograph on the right side of the desk, Noah at the aquarium, pointing at something outside the frame with an expression of complete astonishment. The photograph was taken 8 weeks ago, on a Saturday, the first Saturday in 3 years that Adrian had been free on a Saturday because he had not been scheduled to work. He had Saturdays now. Noah's asthma was controlled. That was the word the pulmonologist used, controlled, and Adrian had learned. In the course of 22 months of managing the condition, that controlled was the best word available, and that it was a good word. The comprehensive health coverage that came with the Director of International Contracts position had meant new medication, a better nebulizer, and 2 specialist consultations that had revised Noah's treatment protocol. In the 6 months since January, Noah had not been hospitalized once. The hospital balance was paid. Rent was current. Mrs. Gallagher had been engaged not as a necessity but as a choice 2 afternoons a week, which turned out to be what she preferred anyway. The work itself was what Adrian had expected it to be. Complex, consequential, and frequently underestimated by the people who commissioned it. He had built a review protocol for international agreements that Laura Stein had adopted firm-wide. He had brought in a part-time specialist in French commercial law and was in conversation with a contact in Tokyo about Japanese regulatory matters. He had, in 6 months, identified problematic language in 11 contracts that had passed through the organization's previous review process without comment. He did not talk about January in the office. He had asked that it not be talked about, and Evelyn had honored the request, and so had Laura. And so, in his way with somewhat more difficulty, had Derek Vaughan, who had come to Adrian's office in February and stood in the doorway for a moment before saying something quiet that was either an apology or very close to one and then left. Adrian had said nothing in return, which was its own kind of acceptance. Evelyn Roth had changed things. Not all at once, that was not how organizations changed, but incrementally, in the small procedural ways that added up. She had implemented a building-wide professional acknowledgement policy. All facilities staff were to be greeted by name. She had created an educational assistance program for contract building employees. She had sat in on a meeting with the facilities contracting company and asked, in her flat, precise voice, what prevented them from offering portable benefits to their night shift workers, and had listened to the answers with the attention of someone who intended to do something with what she heard. It was not transformation. It was motion in the right direction, which was what motion looked like before it became transformation. On a Thursday in July, Noah had a school assignment. The assignment was to bring something to class that described what a parent did for work. The night before, sitting at the kitchen table while Adrian checked a contract clause on his laptop, Noah had asked him what he should bring. They had talked it through. Adrian had explained in the careful, honest way he tried to explain things to Noah that his job was to read agreements between companies to make sure the agreements said what everyone thought they said, that sometimes agreements had problems in them, hidden in complicated language, and that his job was to find the problems before anyone signed. Noah had listened. So you fix things, Noah said. Sometimes I find the problems before they need fixing. That's different. What's it called? Preventing, Adrian said. You prevent a problem. Noah thought about this. But it's still kind of saving, right? Like you save the company from the problem. Adrian looked at his son. Something like that, he said. The next day, Noah told his class, my dad saves companies. He did not describe the conference room on the 52nd floor, or the blizzard, or the cleaning cart left by the service door. He described a man who reads difficult documents and finds the things that are wrong with them. He described it with the plain confidence of someone reporting a fact he has always known. His teacher, a woman named Miss Perkins, who had been teaching second grade for 16 years and had developed a reliable ear for the difference between what children said and what they meant, wrote a note in the margin of her class observation journal. Noah K. talks about his father the way children talk about someone who is genuinely present, not performing. She did not share this observation with anyone, but she thought about it later, when she saw Adrian at pickup, a tall, quiet man who crouched to Noah's level when the boy ran to him, who listened completely when Noah talked, who did not look at his phone. That evening, Adrian stood at the window of the 48th floor office and watched the city. It was July, and the light came long and golden across the lake, and the buildings caught it and gave it back. In the park below, people moved along the paths in that particular summer evening way unhurried, purposeful enough, alive to the hour. He thought about Christine, as he did every evening, briefly and without drama. He thought about the promise hands in the real world and whether he was keeping it. He was keeping it. He thought about the contract on his desk, a new one, a joint venture agreement between a Chicago pharmaceutical company and a French research institute, 63 pages in technical French that his new colleague Renee was reviewing. Renee had flagged 2 passages she wanted his second opinion on. Good flags, the kind that indicated she understood what she was looking for. He would read them in the morning. He thought about the conversation he'd had with Evelyn Roth 2 weeks ago, in her office on the 54th floor. She had asked him directly, without preamble, what he thought the organization needed to do differently in how it sourced and evaluated expertise. He had told her. She had listened without interrupting, which was not nothing. She had asked 3 follow-up questions, which was more than he had expected. She had said, "I'll bring it to the operations committee." He believed she would. He thought about Noah's new inhaler, the one the specialist had prescribed in April, which was smaller and simpler, and which Noah had learned to use himself. He thought about the morning 2 weeks ago when Noah had woken at 6 before the alarm, and had sat in the kitchen with a bowl of cereal and a book about whales. And when Adrian had come in, Noah had not looked up, but had said without any particular emphasis, as though reporting a weather condition, that it had been the longest he had gone without needing his inhaler, and that this was 31 days. Adrian had sat down across from him and not said anything for a moment. "Is that good?" Noah had asked, still reading. "That's very good," Adrian had said. Noah had nodded, turned a page. "I thought so." The first snow of the season would come in 4 months. It would come quietly, as it always did, while the city was still trying to hold on to the last warmth of November. It would settle on the glass and the stone and the crowded intersections, and the world would go white again, and he would stand at this window and look at it. He would think about a conference room on the 52nd floor. He would think about a contract on a glass table and the particular quality of silence that follows a joke that has not landed the way it was intended. He would think about the cleaning cart by the service door, the spray bottle he had set carefully on the floor, the moment he had sat down and opened the document to page 44. He would think about all of it the way you think about things that changed the shape of your life, not with nostalgia, not with bitterness, but with the particular clear-eyed attention you bring to facts that need to be remembered accurately because they happened and cannot be revised. He still cleaned things, he thought, just different things now.